Our goal would be to have 100% participation in the flood insurance program. The flood insurance program, we think about paying our private insurers. The private insurers don't provide this. It's a national flood insurance program provided through FEMA. Okay, and right now, what we've paid in flood premiums, the flood losses, is 7 to 1, meaning that we've collected $7 for every dollar that we've put in. Okay, this flood insurance is not a profitable business, which is why the federal government's in that business, because no one else wants to be. The only people who buy flood insurance are people who are going to flood. So thus, it makes it not a profitable business. We pay $1, we've already gotten back $7 for every dollar we put into the program. So I know we have a bunch of individual concerns. People say, well, I paid it and I didn't get this in Katrina, or I didn't do this. But if you just take a look at the block numbers, for every dollar we've paid in premiums, we've gotten back $7. We need to think about disaster resiliency. Flood insurance provides us that. Okay, it also provides us legal footing to recoup our losses. And the biggest thing is it gives us independence from Baton Rouge and Washington. If you have a community that does not have flood insurance, or is underinsured or grossly underinsured or without coverage, we are dependent then upon Washington and Baton Rouge to bail us out of that situation for our recovery. If we're a parish who participates and has many policies out there and a large percentage of homeowners with policies, then we are already covered for our losses, and our community can recover and rebuild quicker. I just had to point this out because this is just staggering, staggering. Repetitive losses. We're one of the highest repetitive loss counties across the United States. Right here, St. Charles Parish. We have in excess of 400 repetitive loss structures, meaning that those structures have flooded twice, not once, twice within the last 10 years. And I can show you something else. We've had somewhere around 6,100 individual flooded homes since 1979. And of course that could be repetitive, but it's a lot. It's a staggering number, and not all of those homes, those are just the homes that we're talking about that have flood insurance. Even with the rain events of last week, I've run into people who do not have flood insurance and their homes flooded just 2 weeks ago. But it's a lot of repetitive losses. To prevent all of this, we run a massive drainage system. We've got 46 different pumping stations throughout the parish. We also have close to 1,000 miles of drainage, canals, waterways, infrastructure, just to deal with this. If the public works worked every day, they would have to go out there and clear 3 miles a day, every single day, including weekends and holidays, to just stay up with the work that they have. 3 miles a day, if we were just to clean every area once a year. So when we're talking about clearing canals, clearing ditches, and we need to do, I just want you to know, I agree, but the work is unbelievable when you think about it in those numbers. 3 miles every day, no days off. And there's no way in the world we're even close to that. Just going to wrap this presentation up, I want to discuss a few things with you. Things that are about to break here shortly. This council did not, but the council prior had to adopt what they call advisory-based flood elevation, much like many of the communities across southeast Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. This is directly quoted from FEMA. FEMA has completed an early assessment of the 1% annual chance of 100-year flood still water elevations called swells, which incorporate storm data from the past 35 years, including Hurricane Katrina and Rita, new and existing long-term digital tide gauge records, and other existing engineering studies. This is what's all been brought into bear to come up with these advisory and then base flood elevations. The results of the analysis, and even though these aren't permanent yet, suggest that the swells, which are the still water elevations cited in the current flood insurance study for St. Charles Parish, are adequate along Lake Pontchartrain, meaning that the East Bank is, for the most part, going to stand pat, and the Gulf of Mexico. However, due to land subsidence, and Mr. Duarte told you that, they built a levee by 2010, 16.5 feet, to make sure it still offers protection, and just 10 years later, it has to go to 20 feet because of subsidence issues. However, due to land subsidence, loss of protective coastal barrier over the last 10 to 20 years, and inclusion of wave setup, higher storm surges, and large waves can be expected to propagate further inland than previous estimated. For these reasons, FEMA expects, and this is very important to you and all of the residents here, that the base flood elevations will be increased at least 1 foot on the future revised flood insurance rate maps for St. Charles Parish. That is coming because our threat is being recognized more and more, and the models are showing that we are becoming more and more vulnerable. And it's all of those different reasons in there. Higher storm surge, subsidence, all of these different issues. Now, this is what the advisory base flood elevations look like along the East Bank, and just kind of giving an outline, but in general, you can see the different contours here. And those areas in the blue, which we don't have development, you'd have to build as high as 15 feet because you're outside of any type of levee protection. One of the things that we got to take in mind as we go forward with our, I guess you would call it drainage, levee, just protection, storm protections, protection from flooding. We are subsiding and sea level is rising. And you just heard Mr. Duarte talk about that in the design basis for the Donaldsonville to the Gulf project. Talking about a levee that has to be built tomorrow at 16.5 feet, but by the year 2020 needs to be as high as 20 feet because of subsidence issues. We are sinking and mean sea level is rising, and that's not my opinion. That has been determined by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Geodetic Survey, Louisiana State University, and many others. Subsidence affects our drainage infrastructure, requiring more and more maintenance. Even when we start talking about swales, subsurface drainage, all of this stuff is being affected more and more by subsidence, and I'm seeing it being here since 1990. I see it greatly in our older subdivisions like in Norco, in the areas in the Mimosa area. The drainage issues are becoming more and more because the overall basin is changing. You're having centers of the subdivision that are actually sinking while other areas aren't, or not sinking at the same rate. And it's changing your constant flow of all the conveyance systems, making a very, very difficult job, more and more difficult each and every year. So all of that has an impact. And where I'm going with this is, the last point here is that the effects of subsidence affects our levees. Again, Mr. Duarte just said 16.5 feet 2010. You got to go to, in 2020, we've got to be all the way up to 20 feet. You're always, as we build levees, you're always going to fight subsidence. No matter how high we build, we fight subsidence. Requiring additional lifts and additional maintenance and additional money, and we know we're going to have that. And we're seeing this as far as the sinking benchmarks. This was a great example when a geodetic survey went out to near Grand Isle, Fifi Island. They went and looked for the benchmark, which is supposed to determine how high land is above water. And here we go. They had to get out in a 15-foot flatboat with a 25 horsepower engine to drive out to do surveying. It kind of just really illustrates our issues that we're having. Here's another trend here. This is just showing how mean sea level is rising along the Grand Isle area, along the Louisiana coastline. This is a staggering number when you think that sea level is rising 3.23 feet a century. And for the most part, all of the structures are 90+% of the structures we have in St. Charles Parish are based on NGVD 1929. Okay, so we're talking about that sea level, as when we talk about something being 1 foot above mean sea level, if it's based on NGV 1929, chances are that area that we're talking about 1 foot above sea level is really 1 foot below sea level, as referenced to what it is today. This council has addressed this in the past. We've been very progressive. Now the Planning and Zoning Department requires elevation certificates to be an NAVD 88, which is a much more current standard in reference to current sea level. Last slide here. Changing directions, flood protection, disaster resilience. One of the things I would hope in my career that I could really focus us, and that means everyone, because this doesn't just happen with the council, one administration, but it's a cultural change. But we have, for the longest time, had our focus strictly on drainage infrastructure, and it's not enough. How do we know it's not enough? We've got some of the largest repetitive floods throughout the country. We rank 22nd as a state, ahead of 32 other states and territories for our repetitive losses. So what we're doing, just strictly drainage infrastructures, 46 pump stations. The more pump stations you build, the more you got to maintain. Conveyance systems, over 1,000 miles of conveyance systems, okay? And it's very difficult. But we need to shift our focus, just my opinion, we need to shift our focus from drainage infrastructure alone. Not that we don't need drainage infrastructure. We still and will always need those things, but to also start considering higher base flood elevations. Not tomorrow, but it needs to be in our conversation.